Well, hello there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to the Insight Family webinar. My name's Adam Woodgate. I'm VP of Research Solutions here at the business, and my colleague Jack Day is with me. Jack?
Thanks, Adam. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jack Day. I'm the Global Strategic Account Director within the business. Thank you for joining us today. Adam, if we move to the next slide, I'm sure many of you will know by now, but for those who don't, the Insights family, we're a leading provider of real-time data and insights from families, kids, teens, and parents. Never leaving field, we survey hundreds of thousands of consumers on an annual basis across the 22 markets, which you can see on screen, which span 6 continents. And we do this ultimately to bubble up scaled and robust insights to support our partners in making better informed business decisions. So today, this is just one of a number of webinars that we host throughout the year, which many of you, I'm sure, will know about already. And I hope you find value in this one. I'll hand back to Adam, and he can take us through the running order.
Yeah, so this started when our CEO last year said, why don't we produce a licensing report into the kids space and licensing around kids brands? And we looked into it. No one had done it, so we thought we'd do it. And thank you to you if you joined, were one of the many who downloaded our first issue, and we look to repeat it in the future. But we thought we'd put together a little run through for an hour or so on what we see as the licensing market and why it's become such an important facet today. Licensing has moved on. It's no longer about simply extending a brand. It's about creating an ecosystem that lives where kids are, as opposed to the other way around, being audience first. So we're going to look at the size of the market to start with. We'll do that in a moment. And then really we want to focus on our data, looking at top IPs across region where those IPs originate, then look at what's growing, the nostalgia phenomenon. I have lots to say about that. And then we're going to look on purchase behavior. And I think no one could ignore the Minecraft story. The most successful movie of the year so far. What can we learn from how Minecraft has really captured its core base of fans, but also it's been able to expand that to a new audience as well. Some key takeaways, and I think we should have time maybe for 1 or 2 questions at the end. So what's the size of the market? It's huge. Our friends at Licensing International supplied these numbers. The market stands just under $370 billion US a year, which is that's last year's figure. And that's up nearly 4% on the year before. So it's a huge, huge business opportunity. And then when we look at the different segments, it won't surprise you how big the entertainment character segment is. Kids invite their favorite IPs into their living rooms, onto their screens, into their lives on a daily basis, and generating just shy of 150 billion. And that revenue splits out between TV and film, and then anime, gaming, and social. So 43% for the former, 33% for the latter. And most of the revenue coming from, classic properties, evergreens, heritages, whilst a fifth actually in a market where it's tough to launch new IP has come from new properties. Okay, so let's have a look around the 3 basic regions that we look at. So that would be the Americas, then EMEA, and then APAC. Jack, this is an interesting list of IPs for so many different factors.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we can see here is we've segmented by the era in which the IP was originated. So the first thing we pulled out is that four of these IP, being Spider-Man, Harry Potter, Batman, and Captain America, they feature in both kind of 6 to 12s and 15 to 18s as well. So a lot of multi-generational storytelling, which captures very broad age range there. I think the one thing though that is equally more contrasting is only 10% of of this list originates after the year 2000. So we'll go deeper into why we think that might be in a number of different ways later on. Of course, we're just looking at the Americas here, but the story absolutely repeats itself as we move into EMEA as well.
Yeah, I mean, when we were putting this together, we thought there's so many different ways we could look at this. We focused on 6 to 12s and avoided preschool because preschool's a different space. It behaves different, in terms of brands being parent-led as opposed to child-led. The moment children get to school, we know that's when they start to build in-school friendships, and friends start influencing their tastes, as much as parents. Before long, as any parent will know, you fall into the background as kids' tastes are driven by their own passions and interests, but also that of their friends. For me here, I think the era is amazing, just how many originate beyond the lives of Gen A, if you think Gen A 2010 onwards, but beyond that as well, if you look through the list and you just figure out where stuff came from, we've got IP in there that dates back to 1938 in the form of Superman. We've got IP in there that generally comes from print or real strong narrative IP, so the Spider-Man, the Marvel series. And then you've got TV influencing things with SpongeBob, Mr. Bean, that's these days is the animated spin-off. For anyone that doesn't know, the live action silent kind of comedy that was Rowan Atkinson, that Tiger Aspect made originally for TV in the 90s, but then was an animated version. And then we've got we're starting to see the games, and I'll move on while I'm talking to Asia Pacific. We're starting to see game IP appear in the form of things like Sonic, I think, on the last slide, but we're also seeing we'll see Mario and other stuff as we go beyond the top 10, which don't not on these particular lists. And then we've got some toy IP, which isn't surprising. And then one or two perhaps surprises throwing up, like Hello Kitty, which has kind of had a resurgence because of the nostalgia factor. And we'll come on, actually, we're going to do a little focus on Hello Kitty for you as well. Anything else on that?
Yeah, I guess yes, right, Adam. I guess the sort of anime. Actually, if you go back to the EMEA slide, we can start to have a look at sort of anime's growing resonance through the region as well. And we've talked a lot about this as a business with some of the anime reports we published around February early this year. This is obviously in multiple touch points as well, and throughout the deck we'll start to get into how fandom is, what's the source of that fandom, content through to consumer products, and it's great to see that is transcending into Western markets as well. Yeah, moving on.
Yeah, so a quick overview then from the 3 regions. And I'm not going to narrate the slides because I'll let you read them for yourself. I mean, the thing for me is what we're seeing really with all these IPs is the strength of the heritage IPs. I think the shock for me is how few new or recently launched IPs are breaking into that top 10. And I always talk about at shows, kids have 3 or 4 super favorite brands that they lock their passions into. And, it takes a lot to leverage out one of their passion brands for a new brand emerging. It's not impossible. It's done it over the years. We've seen new IPs come in. Bluey probably is one example that originates in TV, but we've got, for a slightly younger end, I know as examples, but Gabby's Dollhouse, Coco Melon and Blippi coming in at the preschool end of that. But we are starting to see, Miraculous is another brand, but it's taking time to spread around the world. So, when you look at the pan-regional view, it's not always what you get in terms of a picture of what's going on in particularly hyper localized situations, i.e. at country level. And then just to pick up on the point of where IP originates, you can see here we've put together 3 charts showing the last millennium, i.e. 1999 and earlier, the first 14 years of this millennium, and then the last 10 years. And you can see that across all three territories, it's around about 2/3 of the IPs in the top 50 that actually originate from the last millennia. So 1999 and earlier.
Super. Yeah, exactly. I think it's just to piggyback off that, Adam. I think it's the idea of sort of newness lacking stickiness, which I'm sure there's a cleaner way of saying that. And there's a number of different obstacles around why that is the case. But I think it goes back to the idea of storytelling, authenticity. We will touch, as Adam says, we'll touch upon Superman later, but the origins of that as a franchise going into its 12th movie next week. There's plenty of reasons around why those IPs which are decades old certainly work, but it's particularly harder, of course, isn't it, now these days to really break through and establish, particularly when we're talking about an age range as broad as 6 to 12.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think, there's so many facets at play now. Kids are everywhere, they're not in one place. So when a lot of those pre-1999 IPs were launched, they were launched to TV, they were launched to film. There wasn't streaming, there wasn't mobile screens that allow kids to take their content with them on the move, that portability of content. So there's a lot of factors at play there. They're also established. Today's Gen A parents are millennials mostly, some older Gen Z for our friends in the States. You've got a thing there where they're going to introduce content that they grew up with. So it's no surprise that the likes of SpongeBob and those great big 90s shows and 90s films are being kind of having a second life as those parents introduce those brands to their kids. So there's that factor. And also, it was much easier back then to launch an IP. You just put it on TV. In the UK, you had 4 TV channels, so it was a lot easier to, get something to a large number of eyeballs. Whereas now you have to have a really broad media plan to get a new IP launched. It's not impossible. We've seen it. Great storyline, great characters, great themes, engages, and I think you can see Bluey Miraculous that we put at the bottom there, but also, and I think, I would advise you, if you haven't, download our anime playbook, because it talks a lot about the fact that anime content really this is a generation that wants to be empowered. Anime is really good at empowering kids. It teaches about the values of friendship. It teaches about, trying to overcome adversity and elements like that within the stories that's really resonating with a generation that wants to be empowered. And then we looked at origin, which I think, is interesting with IP. Obviously, IP that originates in books and comics really lends itself to, because they've got narrative, detailed story, defined characters, themes that engage kids. I think that's interesting. I think what really where we're going to see the future, Jack, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, is where we're seeing, particularly in the Americas and EMEA, video games, mentioning the Minecraft word earlier makes me think that video games are definitely a place where new entertainment is originating, new character and IP, which means new licensed products.
Yeah, oh, no doubt. I think it's really important to remember on this slide as well. This is the origin of where these IPs were born from. When we're talking about intellectual property being born prior to the millennium, there's obviously a resurgence in fandom as the decades go on. So, but really important to bear in mind that a lot of the reason why that's still there is, of course, yes, nostalgia and kind of millennials that are now they have purchasing power, and children in some cases, then they want to pass that down. But actually, as you say, Adam, yeah, different channels of engagement, gaming being an obvious place where a lot of these brands are now existing, are reaching new fans in relevant spaces. However, they start with the idea of driving emotional connection, and we'll get to a couple of examples of that very shortly, of how that kind of deep connectivity with a particular character that in itself has its own narrative, not just the show itself, is really, really important to driving some kind of level of connectivity, I guess.
Yeah, and there's a paradox for me here, which is that you know, there's this need for real-time relevance, but in kids' lives, they're wanting to make sense of the world. A lot of COVID for a lot of kids was a game changer in terms of the way they behaved and the way they reacted to the world around them. So real-time relevance, but yet, and I think the interesting thing for me here as we move into sort of the rising stars bit is about how the IP owners, the media companies, those that own the IPs have been very clever, and you'll pick up on this, and I hate to keep forward selling, but you'll pick up on this with Superman. But the media owners have been very clever at making sure that heritage IP remains relevant for today's audience, whilst that the new and emerging IP, and obviously Bluey's taking real precedence here. And I've always said I don't believe, as someone who loves Bluey, I don't necessarily believe it's necessarily preschool in its entirety, but also I think that as kids become a little less comfortable in the world with the world around them, an IP like Bluey gives them reassurance. But I think
Mm,
it's that interesting point about how brands keep a heritage IP. Take Superman, born in 1938, the year that my parents were born, and is still around today, still relevant, and still able to drag people to the movie theaters.
mm. Of course, and it's no surprise to see Bluey, particularly in Western markets, performing as it is. Number of different reasons for that, as I talked about. The emotional depth, I guess, of the narratives that run through. They really span understanding amongst well, kids broadly speaking, but equally parents as well, and having that trust, as we've learned across many other successful IP, is super important, far beyond just simple awareness or driving eyeballs. The a multi-channel content distribution background, which is certainly, sorry, policy, which is very much my background, in particular, but a very strong presence across streaming, VOD, YouTube, not to mention, and equally a consumer products program, very carefully selected licensees cross category. Yeah, let's hope there's a few more episodes coming.
Yeah, and notice at the bottom right of the screen there in APAC, One Piece, which I think is an amazing IP. Obviously, Netflix, originally Toei Animation, then a deal done with Netflix, and now a deal done with Lego. It's like, that we're really seeing. I mean, I grew up with, and anyone who's old as me and remembers BBC One in the Afternoon Battle of the Planets, which was probably one of the earliest forms of anime that I saw. And obviously in France, a lot of France TV, putting on anime shows because relatively cost effective to fill the hours, up till prime time. So, but on top of that, so in the subculture there is anime, but beyond that, then comes in this new desire within an audience that needs empowerment and those things. And if you think about it on a wider scale, Jack, YouTube, TikTok, they empower kids in the video space. Roblox, Minecraft, these game platforms are empowering kids to go online, be together in an online space, tell stories, make things, do mini games. This whole empowerment thing really, a brand that empowers, and it doesn't always have to empower with platform. I think Bluey empowers because I think, it empowers in a different way. And I think, it's about just, leveraging that value that you can to, think of audience first, where you and I both live, when we, look in the numbers and then go, and people talk to us and say,
Mm.
what's really trending now? What are the big things? And I think that, we'll see more of these partnerships coming on. Stranger Things too, very interesting IP, not really made for kid at all, but yet on so many levels, it really connects with an audience, the 80s connection, kids seeing kids, but also kind of the sci-fi element, fantasy, a very strong genre for kids.
Yeah, absolutely, and all of of course in different ways, but the many the nostalgia, the parental trust, some of the brand activations that we've seen from Netflix have obviously are kind of changing the landscape, um, amongst how kind of that older age group are interacting with consumer products. So that's obviously, we titled that Rising Stars. I think there's obviously a few which are very established in that mix. But as we look at more of the kind of nostalgia driven franchises, I guess we'll have a look at Sonic. Staying the obvious here, millennials and Gen Z, grew up with it. It's similar to, as I was saying about previous IPs, they're now parents, now have the spending power, and they want to bring that upon their own children. And secondly, I guess a bit like Mario in a way, maybe. Sonic as a character, it has its own story and narrative around it, as does Tails and Knuckles, which lend itself to obviously expediting the theatrical release last year, which performed so well. So a strong example there. If we go even further back in time, Superman, again, we've touched upon it already. We're talking about an IP that's kind of in its, would you say, sixth generation of fandom, and continues to evolve with the times. As I say, theatrical release coming out next week. What is it, 10th or 12th major Superman focused film? I don't know. But all stem from a series of comics which predate World War II. I mean, it's being able to keep up with the transition of consumer engagement and preferences is remarkable.
Yeah, I think the evolving with the audiences thing, I think is the key, has been the key to that that it's as relevant today as it was to a 1938 kid reading the comic, a year before war broke out. Elio's a really interesting one. Here's an example, of a Disney Pixar release. Received lots of praise for its visual creativity and the emotion. And anyone who's seen the trailers, I think would testify to that. But it didn't, really catch fire. So 35 million in its opening week. It needs to do a bit more than that to, wash its face, as we would say. There's lots of reasons put out there as to why that happened. I think one of them is, that it faced tough competition in the box office that in its opening week. But it, burdened, I think the big thing here, and we've talked about it since we started this webinar, is, it was launched at a time where it's a new IP against a whole raft of launches that are reboots or not remakes, but sequels or prequels, of an existing IP that people are already familiar with. And Jack and I were talking the other day together, and we were saying that, it's very hard. We know as adults, don't we? You sit there, we're all time poor. You sit there and go, am I going to try something new? If no one's recommended it, you're flicking through the menu, you see something, you go, I'm not hearing any water cooler, coffee, around the coffee machine talk. Am I going to give it a go, or shall I watch Friends again, or shall I watch, shall I watch a James Bond film again? It's like, and there's an element of that with kids too. It was John Landgraf, who was chairman and chief exec of FX Networks, who said, when you choose something, you unchoose all the other options. And if you go down a pathway of watching something that you didn't enjoy, you can never claim that time back. And that's what we all do instinctively as we look at this. And I think there's a strong element of that, which is a brand new IP up against a whole host of known IPs. And I think it just was, one of those things. It wasn't, it was a thingy storm, that it didn't quite work for them that week, and maybe another time of year it would have done.
Yeah, you would have thought so. Certainly would hope so. And I guess it's the idea of known IP that has been around for a long time, and is of course in multiple places, and it's just highly accessible as well. So competition is increasingly growing. And as that relates to consumer products, sort of purchase intent, I guess, a nice little segue there. What we're looking at here are the channels which drive engagement amongst amongst 6 to 18-year-olds, split into two, for specifically their favorite characters. So, spoiler alert, we've broken this down into, again, the 3 regions that we're covering. Video on demand and consumer products lead this cross regionally. You won't be surprised to hear. But specifically for the Americas, what is interesting, I felt, is merch really drives deeper engagement, particularly toys and games, when we compare that with other regions. And as we have the ability within the portal to dig into that a little bit deeper, we can start to split that out by brand, and equally where consumers shop, where the parents go to buy certain things, and that becomes a really important pattern when we're supporting our partners, particularly around the recently attended trade shows, around how to dig a little bit deeper. So again, toys and games really a passion pull amongst 6 to 12 in particular.
Yeah, and I think this was interesting. You and I looked at these yesterday, and I think there's sort of the team that put the slides together very nicely just happened to put on the left there a little code with the trolley and the or the cart and an eye, which is sort of, there's very low friction for a kid to watch something on YouTube, much more friction for them to get mum or dad to buy a toy or game, much more friction for someone to put it on their wish list, or even going to the cinema is, unless you go to maybe the Saturday morning special kids morning, or they take the offers up, it's not it's one of those things that takes a chunk of the family budget. So I think it's interesting that and not surprising that video is a very quick way in for a brand to add connection to a character, and consume it. But I think the fact that video game is really strong across all of this just shows that kids' relationships with with characters is increasingly shaped by the world of YouTube, of video games, and other digital first formats, as well as traditional media.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we were to break that down even further, it doesn't even necessarily need to be the film or the full-length episode. We're talking about purchase intent here. So it's certainly platforms like YouTube, the ability to sort of commission toy-led content, and have kind of that as the focus of the content distributed on that platform. The boundaries are broken in that sense. So I think there's in a positive way. So there's loads to explore in that regard. The next slide, Adam,
Yes.
obviously sees what TV shows products are popular. So the team here, they've broken this down by category, and what is abundantly clear to me, at least, is kids across ages, they want to own tangible consumer products that tie back to their favorite shows. Now, of course, there's Roblox being the best example. It's scaling, it's growing. There's a sense of ownership around that, but it's not going to replace the need or desire, at least, for owning something which they can touch and share amongst friends, on the playground as well. Particularly interesting to see food and drink rise amongst 15 to 18-year-olds. I think that may not have been the case kind of 12 to 24 months ago. We're seeing so many sort of brand partnership activations, haven't we, come up in recent months. I'm sure there'll be more to come next year as well. Really authentically led partnerships in food and beverage as well. So that desire won't wane despite the growth of gaming platforms in particular, I would suspect.
Yeah, and I think anyone who's seen packs of a famous flavored triangular snack that became square, for a certain movie launch will probably test to that. And I was telling the team, I was in my local supermarket, and there's Peppa Pig cake mixes, Bluey cake mixes, Paw Patrol cake mixes, all clearly, intended to create those, not, they work multiple levels. Remember, making cakes as a kid is a parent-child sort of activity. Now you do it the old-fashioned way with flour and eggs and butter and so forth and sugar, or you can buy a cake mix with your favorite IP on, and maybe they've got a little mold in there or something. But I think that for me is very much a growth area, and it's certainly something that came out in the licensing report that we put together, is just that we're seeing this licensing move into the unexpected categories, which is a real sea change. I think the other thing, you said it, but just to pick up on it, is wearing the IP. The kid who walks around with the Minecraft t-shirt or the Bluey t-shirt, whilst they look cute and they look great, they're also showing the world their fandom. And I think there's a big element of that as we look at this.
Yeah, that identity, absolutely. So some of the regional, again, won't read off the slide too much here. There's certainly a space for kind of linear TV and of course kind of cinema releases, for those theatrical releases. It still has its place amongst in on this slide, at least, US teens. Across EMEA, gaming equally as popular a channel as streaming. I'm sure that gap will widen as well, as the months go on, particularly as some of the existing IP that we're exposed to at the minute is finding new audiences all the time. So I'm sure that'll be a case as well. What do we got next, Adam?
Well, I was just going to say here, the one thing that I would just want to say on this is, maybe there are opportunities for anyone working in the licensing business to look at unexpected categories, but there's certainly a recommendation or a thought would be the expansion into edible, wearable, collectible categories that are tapping that emotional connection. I think is, and I think that's a nice segue into what I call the localization of global, or the globalization of local, whichever you want to talk about.
Few examples you can see on the screen here. We are going to focus on a couple of them, one on each side. The first is Magic the Gathering. So global franchise. I'm sure many of us that attended showcases in recent fairs. An example. This example given actually is in relation to the Gathering Arena as a free-to-play digital collectible card game, if you like. So this year, Year of the Snake, they produced kind of themed cards, if you like, which ultimately were launched from memory to enhance the engagement within an already very rich engaged community, and participation within the tournament as well. So unsurprisingly, this became not only a collector's item, but what really drove not only social kind of awareness and kind of viral trends in various spaces, but the limited availability within certain select game stores across Asia Pacific became that maybe they were sought after as well. So capturing the imagination of an already engaged fan base, just an example of how that can be squeezed even more so with locally and authentic, relevant examples. This being a good one of that.
Yeah, and then there's a brand that's been around so long, Hello Kitty, Sanrio. A really, authentic Japanese brand, embrace kawaii culture, embrace cuteness, as you can tell. Very, very clear proposition for the audience that really engaged with it. You know what you're getting, very distinctive. You don't need to see the word. It's the perfect brand. They've built it. It's authentic. It sticks to its core, and it's been around a long time. We're now seeing cafes, pop-up shops, supporting of sports teams and so forth. With this IP, and it's living again with a new generation. Again, partly because of this nostalgia theme, which is that Gen A are wanting to experience a childhood as Gen A that they didn't experience. So it's not like you and me, Jack, of looking back to when, both of us are dads, looking back to, reliving our lives, our childhoods vicariously through our kids and being able to embrace all those fun things like Rugrats and, Johnny, what's his name? Oh, grief, the Cartoon Network show. Anyway, but, that whole thing is our thing. But for today's Gen A, they're wanting to experience content that they've never lived through as a childhood. And here we go with yet another IP, a heritage IP, but being, tailored for today's audience. And I think, the nostalgia factor driving it, gifts are driving it. Certainly, it has an audience skew, as you might expect, but that's fine. Um, you know, uh, but I think the thing is here now, Sanrio are looking at how they figure out how to leverage the value from its where the brand originated, kind of in the physical space, and how that then expands onto the, sort of the emerging digital first formats. So I think that is a brand to watch, but it's not, these two aren't the only ones. There's a lot of examples of that, and I think the whole this, not building a global brand that you have to localize, a local brand that's becoming globalized, especially to a generation that sees no borders, I think is a really fascinating play that we're going to see. And we're in a world now where Gen Betas are being born, where they will pick up that baton as they grow older.
Yeah, quite right. So moving to Minecraft and what they got right. Well, in short, quite a lot. But we're gonna focus on three categories. We'll touch upon gaming. So right across the market coverage that we have here at the Insights family, 22 markets. Minecraft, it remains a favorite gaming experience amongst 9 to 12s, and no sign of that slowing down. As it relates to toys, it ranks second amongst 9 to 12-year-olds in the US as a desired toy. And then as we get to the film, multiple sources, of course, as well as ours, not only show its popularity and how many turned out, but equally what that grossed as well. So as we go through to the next slide, so what we have here, a year-on-year comparison between Minecraft's popularity as a game, specifically obviously on PC and console. Three global examples we have here across our three regions, and the story is succinct, particularly in Japan with its highest step change. We've taken this from January to February 24 in 2024, and then same again in 2025. And obviously a lot has happened in that period, but all in the right direction. The next slide, obviously, as we kind of drill in a little bit deeper into some of the brand extension pieces, we've looked at Brazil here specifically, and the trajectory is comparable across a number of other markets as in relation to consumer products. But really just highlights, I guess, the importance of regional adaptation for IPs with global resonance. It's a powerful example when we look across not just markets by region, but globally, how the trajectory of this particular line is similar for other markets as well. We can share a little bit more on that in the deck, which we available to you after this webinar. And then lastly, I think we're still counting, aren't we? Of course, there should be an asterisk on this, but a hugely successful release. I'm sure with sort of TVOD revenue and wider home entertainment, this will soon hit the billion. But a great success story, a load of discussion online, Reddit to TikTok to YouTube, Instagram and the like. So yeah, a really good example. I would like to hope that there'll be another example of this in the not so distant future. But no, really successful story here.
Yeah, and I think as I've said for many years, and I know other friends and colleagues in the industry have said, digital is going to be the space where the big IPs are originating. Not bad for $150 million cost of film to make and touching $1 billion. I think for me, the last slide, though, I thought was interesting, Jack, because I think it shows the value of our monthly data, which is whilst numbers move around, you can definitely see a long run growth trend there over the last 12 months. And an advantage of not being in never being out of field is that we're tracking the data on a daily basis, and that does give us that ability for customers to see how things are moving, both short term and longer term, which and pick up seasonality, which is really important. Obviously, that was Brazil, so Southern Hemisphere, slightly different trends to Northern Hemisphere because of obviously the winter summer is the opposite way round. I think for me, Minecraft was interesting on the sense that, for the last, well, really since COVID, the story has been Roblox, Roblox, Roblox. This open platform, anyone can create, anyone can make, anyone can build. And I think it's been this, the talk has been there. But quietly in the background, Minecraft has kept its fans, it's satisfied them, it's built this open world, Microsoft that bought it, have nurtured it, and there's Minecraft for education, there's various other elements of it, and again, I think it shows for what is not a high-res product, it's like chunky early days of computer games. We all know that, but that's something about the loveliness of it. But I also think just the fact there are no rules, it's this what we're seeing particularly with 6 to 12s, which is where they move away from structured play into this open-ended play. It's something that lets their imagination fly, and that's what Minecraft does. And I was telling Jack that I had the privilege of working on a project about Minecraft a few years ago, where I was talking to some girls who play together, and they play digitally across servers. And they were just saying, we're building the world around us, their school, their sports club, their neighborhood, and they're building that in Minecraft, which I think is amazing in the way that 30, 40 years ago, a kid would have drawn that and with felt tips and paints and colors. Fascinating just how, technology is allowing kids really to, record their world in different ways. If they want to do it physically, they can. If they want to do it digitally, they can. Key takeaways, before we move on to the Q&A. So, it's really interesting, isn't it? Sarah DeWitt, I was watching her talk at a conference a couple of years ago. She heads up PBS Kids, someone I absolutely respect. And, she was saying when we're introduced to a new IP, we think about how it can live in all the possible ways that it could live. And so I think it's our first, and that has resonated with me forever, which is that it's about you're building an ecosystem. You're starting with an IP, not a TV show, not a book, not a game. The IP is the origin. You're not going to launch on all platforms straight away. It's not feasible. There isn't the budget. You're going to want to test the water and see which platforms work best. But you're building an IP that at some point down the road is going to be in a lot of places. It's taken Lego many, many years to be in all its places. So launching something new today will take time. And the great thing is you can test things, that the test, build, fail fast, try hard, fail fast, works with YouTube Shorts, and all the other platforms that you can use to get a brand out there. So I think, it is about thinking, and certainly, it's almost the hygiene factor of YouTube. It has to be there because it's part of kids' lives. It's almost an expectation. So that's a given. So where else are you going to be? So, and I think that leads into the second point that YouTube's the given, but don't chase other platforms. Go where where kids are. We know where kids are. They are everywhere, but they move around. They're not in the same place at different times of day. And they're not just always on screens. There's plenty of time where they come off screen, because just like adults, they have a level of fatigue. So, that does happen. Oops, sorry. I don't know what's happened there. There we go. Sorry about that. So yes, so in the sense that You need to be where kids are, and customers will have that data. I think thinking fast, reacting to a market, is very much important. Speed and cultural relevance, they're beating scale. I mean, look at the success of all the productions coming out of South Korea have had, from K-pop, Squid Games. We're seeing that's very much a factor. That's important. And then longevity, evolve content and products with your fan base. And I think that's a great advantage of this feedback loop world we live in now, where the creator, kind of, if you think of a game of tennis, serves the ball, and the ball is the piece of content going to the audience. The audience receives it and in a split second interprets it, and either serves it back with some feedback to the creator or doesn't. Years ago, it was a world of, the only way you got your feedback was newspaper sales, magazine sales, TV ratings. Nowadays, a YouTuber or a creator is putting content online, and they're getting feedback through views, through completes, through comments, almost instantly. So we've got this really good feedback loop. So take advantage of it, really do that. So, and just to the point of about chasing platforms, I should have also said, go where kids play, snack, stream, and scroll, not just where they shop. That was the point there. And then, unsubtle plug for the business. They use real-time data to inform your decision making. It doesn't take away the heart and the soul of making decisions about content and IP, but it really does help inform the process of maybe prioritization of rolling out across countries, or identifying opportunities where a brand might fit, and actually thinking, do you know what, our brand might not fit in this country, so we'll go somewhere else. Jack, have you got anything to add on that sort of those sort of random thoughts?
I don't actually, Adam. That was very well said. Agree with it all.
Okay, and so to Q&A, and I know our producer for our session will be glad that I didn't end it before we get to the Q&A. So, Labubu, a lot of talk about this. It was in the big article in the FT about 10 days ago, and I think a couple of articles online about its popularity. Any thoughts?
Yeah, a few. What started off as a cute niche little collectible has grown into a global phenomenon. So I guess it started within the K-pop world. It was sort of they number of you can tell my lack of knowledge in that area, but they were certainly seen with them, and that was, I think, the celebrity exposure, keyword being exposure rather than endorsement, I think is really important here as well. It was organic, it was authentic, and that sense has still been captured into what I feel we see Labubu being today. The packaging is massive here as well, cannot be underestimated. The blind box mechanics that are often seen in Pop Mart, that's a good example of that. So you've obviously seen it all over online, and then you get one yourself, and then there's that kind of excitement as you're opening it as well. It's worth noting as well, there's obviously clear traction amongst kids when it comes to Labubu, but it's not necessarily driven by kids, I think it's fair to say. One of our data sets, Next Gen, shows that, which captures ages 19 to 30. So I've got some bits and pieces we can talk through on that. And I guess, like any desirable IP, as I just read this morning, there's a growing amount of counterfeit products, which obviously you never want to see for obvious reasons. However, it does show desirability and arguably availability as well. Does that answer the question?
I think so. I think so. Yeah, I mean, we're not seeing it really in the kids space, so it feels like it's in the older space. We're seeing a little bit of traction in the Far East, in our Far Eastern markets. But we're watching it, and one of the things that we did earlier in the year was we moved to more open-ended responses for kids telling us about the brands that they like across all different platforms, which means that we can pick up on things like this. So we're watching this. It's going to be really interesting to see, is this the next big thing, or will it go the way of the fidget spinners and the loom bands? And I don't want to belittle the brand in any way, but it's always the question, isn't it? Is this the next big thing, or is it going to run its course because fashions move on? So I think that will be interesting to follow, and we will track that over time.
Mhm.
A question came in about where Gen A and Gen Z discover new brands. One of the questions we added in the spring to our survey was asking about how kids discover, how kids search for, and how kids share content they love. And when we say content, you think about games, toys, books, all kinds of content. So what you do see this contrast between what I would call middle grade and preteens here, and older teens, which is the social media factor is huge with older teens. If you're wanting to reach that 15 plus audience, you need to have a social media strategy, because that's where they connect with their world. So, and even I keep getting asked, do kids like Facebook? Look, Facebook's like the pantry, it's like the larder, it's like the store cupboard. Lots of people are on it, lots of organizations are on it, so young people have to use it. Whether A different question is whether you like it as to whether you use it. If you need to use it, you have to use it. So a lot of, it's still part of that social media mix. When we look at the younger kids, though, friends are the key driver. Those playground conversations, the playground, the schoolyard is a hotbed of discovery of brands and content. They're talking about stuff all the time. And when we have another question where we ask them what they're talking about with friends, and that backs up the point I've just made. But then YouTube is just as powerful. TikTok, a smidgen behind. YouTubers, influencers, creators, they're in about a fifth. And don't rule out TV. A lot is written by the end of the doom of cable and broadcast television. It's still able to capture eyeballs. It's still able to capture mass audiences. It's still able to drive audiences to the screen for great content. So a media plan is so much more complex than it was, Jack. You'll know that. But and it means you need this data to be able to kind of figure out how to use your marketing budget very effectively to reach the audience you're trying to target. Oh, yes, this was a question that also I think came in pretty late, so I'm going to do a bit of spitballing here. Our team put this together. Where is demand for licensing products the strongest? So we kind of had a look at, again, another new question, which is at the bottom here. I prefer to buy products related to my favorite character, brand, film, computer game, TV show, etc. And we just picked the strongly agree. And this is where the top three countries in each of the three pan regions are. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? We're seeing, I would have in the Americas, wouldn't you have expected Canada and the US to be the top of that list?
No, I wouldn't.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't know. I mean, when I think of trying to think, so it's obviously a very broad question, and it's a great one that it is. I would think, I think anime titles within that would be a big driver. Yep. So we look at Brazil and Mexico in particular. We know that there's strong sentiment between the demand for products amongst those shows, which of course is how this data has been pulled as well. No surprises to see the UK within this top three as well. I think that's a given. But it was an interesting spread, and of course requires sort of deeper analysis as to why that might be and how it's split by brand. But a great question, and we will follow up in further detail, I'm sure.
Yeah. And well, I believe that's the end of our time together. So on screen now is the QR code. If you haven't downloaded our report, please do. Just click on the code, fill out a couple of the entry blanks, and you can, you'll get a copy of that. And also on our website are all the reports we've published recently. We've talked a lot about anime. Do download the anime report, future forecast. You can have that in the drawer for December and see how close we were to predicting this year. And we're always available to chat via our socials, or you can reach us at hello@theinsightsfamily.com. And we're out and about. Jack you were in Germany last week. We're both at CMC, which starts a week yesterday, doesn't it? Starts next Tuesday in Sheffield, Children's Media Conference in the UK. And I'll be presenting on Thursday about AI, which is the latest disruptor, as if the industry didn't need more disruption, the latest disruptor in kids' entertainment. So I've got a half-hour session on that, and no doubt we will follow that up because there's so much data that came out of that study. We can't fit it into 30 minutes. So that coming up. But thank you for your time. Really appreciate you joining us for the last 55 minutes or so. Enjoy your day, enjoy your rest, and we'll be in touch soon. Take care.